I would say it makes it a lot harder to, using the word operationalize. If you don't have a system in place that really pulls in all members of your team in some capacity to really practice and live out the culture, not just scheduling happy hours. And that can be fun, right? And can be a part of the culture, but the culture at its very, very core can't be there. And the whole team needs to be centered around what truly, how is the culture defined here?
Hi, I'm Gustavo, and I bring you today's topics related to human resources, career management, and business. Welcome to HR Talent and Insiders with me, Gustavo Servia.
Hello.
Hello, Dani. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Very nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you as well.
Yes. So I'm already recording in the background, so we kind of go ahead and get started. But obviously, first and foremost, thank you very much for joining me and accepting the invitation to come to HR Talent and Insiders with Gustavo Servia.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So we have as a guest today, Dani Kimble, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at O'Neill Insurance. O'Neill Insurance is a Ohio-based insurance company that offers business, group health, and home and auto insurance. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Beautiful, beautiful. So it's interesting because even though you work at an insurance company, the topic today is not about health insurance. It's actually about culture. Right. This is a topic that is important to many individuals out there. And the framework that we will use to discuss this topic of culture is actually around the 8-step framework, which was developed by a gentleman by the name of David Friedman, who wrote the book Culture by Design. And I just learned that he wrote another book. But it is in that book where he introduces this 8-step framework. And Dani's here because at O'Neill Insurance, they actually took this 8-step framework and put it into practice. And obviously, I wanted to hear from her directly, her experience. But before we jump into the topic, Dani, I always like to start by not only welcoming the guest, but also allowing the guest, in this case you, to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and if you want a little bit about O'Neill.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on today. It's an honor to be here, and I'm excited to dive into culture. But yeah, so my name's Dani Kimble. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at O'Neill Insurance, and I'd say I've been there for a little over 4 years now. And prior to that, I spent 10 years of my professional career as a dancer and teaching dance. And came into this organization and this industry, the insurance industry, with absolutely no experience in marketing or in insurance, right? And so I sustained a knee injury. Actually, my final semester of grad school, I had sustained a knee injury when I was graduating with a master's in dance. But I was able to recover. I got back into dance. I got into teaching. And I then 5 years later sustained the same knee injury. Ooh. And so that was my time. It was almost, that was the defining moment to say, all right, time to make a switch here, time to make a change. And I went on Indeed.com or something, a job site, and I started looking for jobs that would allow me to be creative, but not physically demanding, right? And I landed on this marketing coordinator position at the local insurance agency up the street, which is O'Neill Insurance. And so I decided, I'll go ahead and apply. And as I was looking and doing my research on O'Neill, on the website, like the website felt very stale and archaic a little bit, and it wasn't mobilely compatible, and the blog content was way outdated. And I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm coming from this beautiful, vibrant arts background. Like, what am I going to do in insurance?
That's right.
And I'm like, you know what? Treat it like an audition. And in dance or in the arts, you always kind of take every opportunity to audition because it gives you practice. So treat the interview like an audition. So I'm like, I'm going to go for it. And I'm so glad I did, because the minute that I met the people, when I walked into that agency and started meeting the people, I was blown away. The people, I truly believe this today still, the people at O'Neill Insurance are pure gold, and they have hearts of gold, and they love what they do, and they're really, really driven to protect people. And I felt that from day one, and I'm like, wow, like this story isn't being told. And while I still, in the past had told stories with my body or through choreography, now I'm like, okay, I'm ready to take on the challenge of telling the story through marketing. And so really what had happened just naturally, because the culture had really taken root by that point, what really happened is the culture became our brand. And so it's been an easy and super fun story for me to tell there. And so yeah, culture is the focus at O'Neill Insurance. We put our people really at the center of it. And
Mhm.
by doing that, we've seen not just our people really start to feel fulfilled and that they're doing meaningful work, but by doing that, it creates a customer experience that can't be matched. And so then the customers start feeling it. And it's been a great journey so far.
So, how long has O'Neill Insurance been around?
1993, 94-ish in the Wadsworth area. But it started as an acquisition. And prior to that acquisition, I believe the initial start was 1924 in the Akron area. And then
Okay.
Patrick O'Neill acquired the business in like 92, 93, 94-ish.
So, but I asked because by the time you came in, and by the way, I sometimes look down because I'm looking at making sure that the camera is still recording. And then I actually have notes. So I
Oh,
take
good.
notes. So I'm looking down.
Sure, no
It's
problem.
it's not that I'm eating cookies, by the way. These
They're
are my
just right
favorite
next to
cookies.
you, right?
They're here. If the guest is delayed, then I take cookies. But you were on time, so I don't have to worry about them. But by the time you came in, the company had been formed for a few years, several years.
Yeah.
So there was a culture already in place. The first thing that I want to hang on to is, by the way, I guess we're fellow artists because I also pivoted from being an actor to being in HR.
Oh, I
I
love that.
did not break my knees. I just got frustrated with the rejections. So,
That
but I
makes
get the concept of auditioning, and sometimes you just go full swing and it works sometimes it doesn't.
right.
But here you come into an organization already formed, and you perceived already a disconnect between what you were visually seeing on the website and the blog, and then I guess the warmth that you were received with. How did the conversation about culture get started upon your arrival at O'Neill?
It was at the forefront. So
Did
right
you
when
drive that conversation?
excuse me,
Did you drive the conversation?
I did not. So right when I sat down at the table, Patrick O'Neill, who's the president of O'Neill Insurance, and his son, Pat O'Neill, who's our vice president, they started with the fundamental of the week. And we have, and we'll talk about it here, but yeah, we have 30 fundamentals, and they started right away saying culture is really important here. It's a focus of ours at O'Neill Insurance, and so this is our process. And then they rolled right into the fundamental of the week. And so they talked through what that meant, how they apply it in the organization, and then that just launched the whole interview really to focus on culture. And to be honest, I think we broke every rule in the interview book. Because it just felt like a very natural, organic, authentic conversation. It didn't feel like an interview. What soft skills? What are your soft skills? What do you think your strengths are, your weaknesses? It was just getting to know each other.
Got it. So when you arrived, was the book and the eight-step framework already in place?
So it had just started to take form, I believe, the month prior to when I was interviewed.
Got it. And I'm interested in that background because, for companies that are considering, where to start, I was not familiar with the 8-step. I haven't read the book, but after watching your presentation where you introduced the 8 steps, I've ordered the book, so I'm waiting for it to arrive so that I can start reading it. But it seems like it's a simple premise, but what I love about it, I'm a framework type of individual. I like the idea of giving a framework, and the 8 steps kind of walk you through it. I'm sure that there's others out there, but do you know why was this book and this framework used and not something else?
Yeah. So I'd say a couple years prior to them landing on the framework, Patrick O'Neill and the leadership team really started studying workplace culture and saying, you know, we really got to get focused on our culture here. And I don't know what really moved the needle there for him to say, this is where my head's going to be at, is now starting to really focus on culture. But he read a number of different books. And then finally, it was recommended to him by Scott Addis, who is part of the Beyond, he runs the Beyond Insurance Global Network. It's a larger insurance group. And he read this book called Fundamentally Different by David.
Oh, that's the first book that David Friedman wrote.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
And so he had become a certified culture consultant with David Friedman. So he recommended this book to Patrick. And when Patrick read the book, he was like, sold, because culture, as you know, can feel fluffy. Culture is hard to really wrap your head around how we implement a strong culture in our organization, right? And so the book, Fundamentally Different, helps you understand that 8-step framework to help operationalize culture into your business. So it gives it a strategy. It makes it tactical and tangible.
And the key word, I guess, here is operationalize, because again, if we don't operationalize culture, I guess it remains on that fluffy, you know, high level, touchy feely, you know, level that then companies, particularly business minded individuals, are not able to touch on it because it's so high level. It's so, again, touchy feely that they may not want to pursue it. Before we talk about the 8 steps, obviously you had already what I consider an important ingredient, which is the president of the company was having the conversation about culture. Mm-hmm. It's very hard. I know that the company, it's a smaller company, but you don't have an HR department, right?
We have one HR person.
One HR person. Yes. So, you know, here you are as a chief marketing officer, actually selling the brand, which makes sense, but you're talking about how that culture, you know, feels and how it is incorporated. And it was you who was actually making the presentation about the 8-step framework. It wasn't your HR person, which I think brings then the second ingredient that to me is important, that regardless if you have an HR department or not, when culture is put on the shoulders of one individual or a department, it doesn't work. Right. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say it makes it a lot harder to, using the word operationalize. It has to be a team effort, really. And so if you don't have a system in place that really pulls in all members of your team in some capacity to really practice and live out the culture, and not just scheduling happy hours, or not just you know, having, hey, we're all having our dogs in the workplace on this day. You know, those things can be components, but and that can be fun, right? And can be a part of the culture, but the culture at its very, very core can't be there. And the whole team needs to be centered around what truly, how is the culture defined here? So they do a great job, and that's where the rituals come into play. Is like the whole team does a great job at really practicing this on a day-to-day basis, and it's not easy. But that's the good thing, you know. It's not fluffy, and that's where we really start to see the results on multiple levels.
Well, I'm glad, obviously, that we're having this conversation. I'm just pulling the 8-step framework here because I want to share it with, you know, because during the presentation that you made, I took some notes because I had not heard of it. And like I said, I'm always looking, you know, I'm a creative individual. I guess the artistic side comes, but I immediately want to put things into not only the context, but the right framework to be able to operationalize or to make it happen. It's like a plan. So I want to dive into these 8 steps. And the first step that David Friedman suggests or proposes is to define, right? He says the employee behaviors, the fundamentals that drive success. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so he says to define the culture in terms of behaviors, or a set of behaviors that are fundamental to the success of the organization. And so I believe through Friedman's work, he has, I want to say, 60 different behaviors that he studied and done a lot of research on to really understand what are the behaviors that need to happen inside an organization that the team needs to be centered around in order for any organization to thrive. Whether it's manufacturing, whether it's financial services, whether it's technology, like no matter the industry, what are the core behaviors that every organization needs to thrive? So he came up with a total, I think, of 60, and they're in this book. They're all labeled in this book, and I can give you a couple examples of different ones. But
yes,
then,
please do.
okay, let me pull those up. So an example of our first fundamental is do what's best for the client, right? It's observable, it's actionable. You know that every decision that we make has to be filtered through that fundamental. Is it in the best interest of the client, right? And so we're coached on that. And if we make an error in some capacity, we're talking through that together to say, like, was that truly in the best interest of the client, right? Another example would be make quality personal. And underneath each fundamental or each behavior, there's a little description. So the description for make quality personal is regard everything you touch as a personal statement bearing your signature. Take pride in the quality and accuracy of what you do and make it exceptional. And so everything that we do, or do you feel comfortable putting your signature on that? That's coming from you, right? So make quality personal. Number 29 for us is make a difference, give back to the community. And so one way we do that is we have 30 hours of paid time off every year to volunteer for a local nonprofit of our choice, to support a cause that we personally care about. So we're very active in the community. Keep things fun is this week's fundamental. It's number 30. And it's like, yes, we still need to have light, and we need to laugh, and we need to stay positive, and we need to have fun. So those are just some examples of behaviors. And we have 30. David Friedman recommends you choose between 20 and 30 in your organization, and then you develop rituals on how you practice those.
So in a way, this is taking the traditional values and converting them into actual behaviors that people can say, oh, that's what it looks like, right? Yeah. Which I think is where many companies fail. They come up with values, respect, collaboration, ethical, integrity, whatever, but they don't necessarily describe what that looks like. And then it leaves it open for interpretation. And my definition of ethical awareness may be completely different from yours, right? Yeah. So the idea, if I understand it correctly, is you have to define what those values are, what those fundamentals are, but you have to put behaviors attached to it so that then you can tell people this is what it looks like. Go out there and demonstrate it. Then you highlighted then on what is the second step, which is to ritualize the practice of your fundamentals. What does that look like?
Yeah, so at the start of every week, we focus on a new fundamental for that week. And at the beginning, when we first started this whole framework, Patrick would lead the week. Every Monday morning, an email would come out with his perspective on that fundamental. And he'd share that with the whole team. Then we do a Monday morning huddle every week with the entire team. We do a stand-up 15, 20-minute huddle with the team. And we start with the fundamental of the week. And not everybody, but people can chime in and share their perspective on it, or share an example or a scenario or a story, right? And then every single meeting that we do throughout the week, whether it's internal or external, we start with the fundamental of the week. So if I'm meeting with a manufacturing company about their group health insurance, I start with the fundamental of the week. And then it gives me an opportunity to share cultures. Culture is very important for us here at O'Neill Insurance. And we want to make sure, there's an alignment there, because we know that that's in the best interest of the organization too, right? That they're working with the right partner. So every meeting.
You actually share some of those fundamentals with your clients.
Always. Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Got it.
It's actually helped us acquire customers too, just because Organizations with good cultures already are looking to be exceptional, right? They're already looking for opportunity, and so they want to learn and they want to know more. So it's been interesting. Another ritual is we do every week, in the middle of the week, a little quiz comes to our emails, and it's a scenario-based quiz. And so we answer the quiz question, and Patrick gets the results, and there's a little prize at the end of the 30 weeks on like who answered correctly the most and things like that. So those are the main ones, just to keep it ingrained, but not to like overdo it.
Got it. But it's pretty much on a weekly basis that this is done.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. All right. Then step number 3 says select people who are the right fit for your culture.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys make that happen?
Yeah, well, I'll say 2. I struggle with the word fit in this one, and I'm not the author of this. I struggle with the word fit because we don't, as a team, don't want everybody being the same.
Correct.
We want diversity of thought. So I kind of refer to it as an addition to the culture.
Got it.
What can we add to the culture? But when you align on the same core behaviors and you bring diversity of thought to the table, I mean, that's when things really get moving in the right direction. So we, in the interview process, we do, and I don't know the name of the exact assessment that we have, but we do have a culture assessment that is pretty spot on. We've been very happy with, and I can get that information for you. But then we also, a lot of the interview process is focused around culture. It is talking about, and then we're trying to also feel if, and looking for if the candidate who's applying is going to ask us about culture first. So are they going to say, what's the culture like in the organization? And immediately, if we hear that, we're like, okay, they care about culture as much as we care about culture.
So you use an assessment. Do you use any type of interviewing technique? Do you keep it as conversations? Do you do behavioral interviewing?
No, we don't.
Just conversations.
Have too much structure on that, right?
Yeah. So I go back and forth. I was a fan of behavioral interviewing. Then I kind of it was too structured. Then I kind of moved away from it, and then I kind of came back to it, and I'm trying to find that happy medium. Sure. Because I do believe in the idea of tell me what you've done, right? As an example. And certainly I've read, enough to know that from a research standpoint in statistics, the research says that structured interviews are better than unstructured, sure. But that just having structured interviews doesn't make you bulletproof, right? I say that, you probably have as much of a chance of hiring the right person by flipping a coin as you do by doing an interview, but it's the combination of elements in that selection process that increases your chances of finding the right fit, the right culture add. So no structured interview, probably similar to what you encountered, which was more of a conversation, kind of getting to know you, but center around the concept of culture.
Right. Yeah. And that's an area that I think we could improve in. I mean, we are an organization, we have about people now on the team, and we're growing. So as we interview, we haven't been off base and culture too much. It's an area to do more research in and grow and move and get better how we structure the interview.
And this concept of culture fit versus culture add. Again, it's one of those things that as I started reading and getting exposed to what people are sharing and saying, there's a debate, because if you hire for fit, you're going to end up with sameness, right? Everybody's the same. And some will argue, well, that's what we want, right? We want the same values. We want the same behaviors. But others say, no, you need to have diversity of thought. You have to have, not everybody is the same. So you need to go for that culture add. What would this person bring that adds value to what it's already in place? What made you, in your case, think or move away from that culture fit to that culture add?
It may just be a perception of words and word choice between fit and add, But I started really following Claude Silver. She's the Chief Heart Officer of VaynerMedia with Gary Vaynerchuk. And I started following her work because she's just super passionate about people and the people experience and the culture there. And she wrote an article and started doing some videos on the difference between culture fit and culture addition. And I started to think from a candidate's experience when they're interviewing with us at O'Neill Insurance, we don't want to advertise that we're looking for a culture fit. And truly, we're not looking for somebody to look and act like us, right? Like everyone is different within our organization. So how do we communicate that? And I feel like that addition term opens more opportunity for diverse people, diversity of thought, everything, right? And they don't feel like they have to, the fit term makes you feel like you have to look and feel like us.
Step number 4 of the framework is integrate new hires into your culture. What does this look like at O'Neill?
Yeah, I refer to integration step as more of the onboarding and bringing them into the fold. So really highlighting our culture even before they get to O'Neill Insurance for their first day on the job. So immediately after they accept that offer letter, we start trying to find different creative ways of showing them our culture and allowing them to experience it and be a part of it, right? And so one of those steps is we send a welcome gift out to their home. So it's a box that lands on their doorstep, and inside it is O'Neill swag, a big welcome to the team. We're so excited that you're here. A note from Patrick O'Neill, the president. We will include that book, Fundamentally Different, in their welcome box. Or if we're reading another book, for example, we read the book together, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. So if we're reading or studying a book together, then we'll throw that book in there just so they feel part of the conversation. And then just odds and ends gifts and things like that. And then we also send out a welcome email, and it's pretty bright and graphic and fun. But in there, it's just very personal, and it asks them a couple different questions. It gives them the layout of what they can expect the first week on the job to look like. It shows them the calendar. And then it asks them to fill a Google form out. And in the Google form, it's like, we want to introduce you to our team. We're so excited to introduce you to our team. So share with us some of your hobbies, your passions. What's your favorite food? What's your favorite candy bar? And I also say we like to record a video on your first day and share that with our clients and our community as well. So that way, initially I'll admit I was like going on their Facebook pages and polling pictures and things. I'm like, I should probably ask them what they want to share. So that way they're giving me the permission to share this, right?
That's right.
They attach photos of their families or their dogs or things like their kids or things like that. And so what I do with that information then is I decorate their desk like crazy. So for instance, we just hired he played football at West Virginia University. And I'll send you this onboarding video, but we made it all about like a virtual NFL draft. And I pulled a clip of what he was doing. He was in like a press conference saying, oh yeah, I'm really excited about the opportunity in his football gear. And we embedded that in the video. He's a Cleveland Browns fan, so I decorated his desk with Cleveland Browns gear. I printed pictures of his family. I had those framed on his desk, all these things, right? Just so nobody wants to walk in on day one to an empty desk with a pen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we really lay that out nice. And then on day one is when we're still doing some of the HR processes, the paperwork, all of those things that still have to happen.
Yep.
But we're really introducing them to the people and the culture of the company. He goes to lunch within the first week. He goes to lunch with the president, and he also goes to lunch with the department and gets to know the people within his department. He meets virtually now, because we're all virtually with every person on the team and attends those meetings and things like that. So on day 4, a pizza box shows up on the doorstep, and it's Illuminati's Chicago pizza. And the best pizza, right?
Oh, just for that.
and actually, those ship really nice. They show up in a big red and white checkered box.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really cool. And it shows in like it's frozen inside, and it says on the side of the box, and I'm sorry, they can be heart-shaped pizzas too.
Yep.
So on the box, it says, we know the first week on a new job can be stressful, so dinner's on us. Love O'Neill Insurance. And then you open it up and it's 2 heart-shaped frozen pizzas.
So in essence, it's about, yes, the traditional transactional aspects of paperwork, but it's also how you make them feel. And again, it's operationalizing the culture by taking steps and actions that make these individuals feel welcome, part of a team, so that they can immediately integrate into the culture, particularly when you're giving them the book or the book that you are reading at that time. Okay, good. So obviously, we can debate how this could be replicated at a larger organization, 1,000, 1,500, but that's not the point necessarily of this show, of this episode. It is more about covering the steps and then allow people to then start thinking, how can they make this happen into their own organizations?
Right.
Because I am thinking the same thing, as I think of these steps, I'm thinking, okay, how do I make this happen in the organization that I'm part of? Because I do love the simplicity of the framework. I think it's actionable. Operationalizing it is the key. And that will depend on the players, will depend on the size of the company, et cetera, the resources, et cetera. The 5th step is communicate your culture throughout the organization. What does that look like at O'Neill?
So we do have our fundamentals hanging up on the walls. In fact, I call it like the stairway to heaven, because 30 fundamentals are like stared all the way up to the upstairs. But so we do have them out on the walls, but I think what's important about having it out in front of you is that it's constantly in front of you, but the key is to pull it off the walls and to live and breathe it. And so we have these, and I wish I had them. I'm working at home right now, but I wish I had it with me. We have these like Rolodex cards things. Every employee has them on their desk at work, and then you can flip to the next fundamental when it's the next week. So it's constantly in front of you. We have these business card looking fold outs that have all 30 fundamentals on them. So there's a lot of materials that we've printed to have them always available to reference. But I will say, so having them on the walls is important, but the key is to really pull it off the wall and act and live it out. And so it's a combination of both.
Yeah, I remember, coming from the hospitality industry, I worked with Starwood Hotels and Resorts, and they had, and similar, they created these cards, and part of their daily lineup was you needed to cover one card every day. And yes, it became repetitive, but it was the point that you had to bring it to life. And, you go through the 30 or so cards, and then you start again at the top. And then it was about how creative can you become to still keep it alive. But the fact that we were actually having conversations regularly about these behaviors, these expectations, made it not only easier for people to retain, but the repetition then helps to translate into actual actions. So I can imagine you guys, having your lineups, having your weekly meetings and bringing these to life, because what most companies do, they have beautiful posters and that's where it sits. That's where it ends. Yeah. What about in terms of communicating these throughout other processes around people? Like I can think performance reviews. Did you guys do anything with it as part of it?
Yes. So every team member has a quarterly review with their department head and an annual review as well. And the fundamentals are always a part of those conversations. So it's an opportunity to coach and teach around them. But we also give the employee the opportunity to say, which 3 do you feel like you're really strong at? And which 3 do you feel like you could really grow and improve on? And we allow them to talk, right? Like everybody has the opportunity to share like how they're feeling about them. And then the leader of that, who's conducting the performance review, has the opportunity to then say, well, I really appreciate your thoughts on that. It gives me more insight, more perspective, right? But I also find this one to be a really strong skill set of yours. And I love watching you behave this way. And then on the reverse side, you can talk about others that here's an area where I could see you could really improve on a little bit more. And so it opens up dialogue and conversation in those performance reviews as well.
Got it. So you do have quarterly type check-ins
Yep.
instead of just the only the annual.
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right. Step number 6 is coach to reinforce your culture.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that at O'Neill.
So I sometimes call it the culture cop. And sometimes everyone is the culture cop at some point or another, but it's like you use the language of the fundamental to coach on a behavior. And so I really love this example of Patrick O'Neill. One of our fundamentals is speak straight. So, there's a lot of times where you're just trying to feel out a situation. So you're talking with another person about somebody else or about a situation that somebody else was involved in, and it leads to drama. It's toxic for the culture. Like anything we can do to avoid having conversations about somebody else when they're not in the room. Like we have to practice that. And so, and it's easier said than done. Sometimes you're not ill-intentioned when you're doing it, but it can easily evolve into that. So, he'll go right up to that conversation. I've seen him do this multiple times and I love it. He'll go right up to that conversation and say, this is an opportunity to speak straight right now. This is an opportunity for you to go into the office and have this one-on-one conversation. Use the language of the fundamental to help you enter into that conversation. I think that's so valuable. And so that's really because they're not values that say integrity, respect, trust, because they're behaviors that are actionable and observable, they're easy to be coached on.
Correct. I mean, it's going back to the premise that if you don't define and include those behaviors, then you're leaving too much room for people to interpret. And at some point, the fundamentals and the behaviors then dictate how things should be done. So people that may not be comfortable may have to start being comfortable. And then part of the coaching would be, I'm assuming, is helping them gain comfort in, speaking straight versus speaking behind other people's back.
Right.
Now, you mentioned this concept of culture cop, and I laughed a little because that's how many times they see HR, right? HR is the principal's office. They're the ones walking around, don't do. But I actually embrace that concept. So, if I'm walking around the hallways and there is employees and they kind of sit up straight and they go, oh, shh, quiet, Gustavo is coming. The fact that they're actually articulating that and I'm hearing it tells me that they feel comfortable enough to play, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if it comes to the point of coaching them around the culture, it is okay if you're a culture cop. All I would like to ask is that there has to be several culture cops throughout their organization, not just one, because it's going to die. That's like having one salesperson for the entire country, no segments, no vertical alignment, and just saying, well, you can sell the whole world on our premise. And you go, that's pretty difficult to do. What do you think?
Yes, no, I completely agree. Everyone has the opportunity to be the culture cop, and we push that out and we encourage that as much as we can. In fact, my chief operating officer sent me a video today on Simon Sinek talking about everybody in the organization being a leader. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, well, let's get this. And she felt this way as well. Like, let's get this out to the team because we want everyone to be considered a leader, and we want everyone to feel and think and believe that they are a leader in the organization.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Step number 7 is lead your culture by example. Oh my God. This is so important. But what does that mean and what does that look like at O'Neill?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that we put a lot of value in this one because we can not, and I say we as like the whole organization, everyone has to not, I don't know the right word, but like live by these behaviors together, right? And so if Patrick or if our chief operating officer, Jody Maybaugh, isn't making quality personal and nobody feels comfortable coaching them on that, then this culture thing isn't real.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they take great pride in studying and really living out the behaviors and the fundamentals, as we all do. And I think the rituals help us do that. It just helps us be better people, both professionally and personally. And so we're all not perfect. We all make mistakes.
Yep.
But the ability to be open to being coached, regardless of what role you have in the organization, I think is key to help lead by example.
Yeah, this concept of lead by example is a tough one for some people because it is holding them accountable. And today's work environment is increasing or demanding a higher level of accountability, of self-accountability. Where when I came up the ranks, the whole premise of, do as I say, not as I do, was prevalent, right? And you wouldn't question leadership. And like it or dislike it, here comes millennials and they say, why? Why do I have to do it if you're not doing it, right? And we get upset because millennials are, talking back and they all want a trophy and all of that crap that we attribute to millennials. But as I said, millennials did something that other generations have not done, which is they question, why do I have to accept what is being presented to me? Why is it that it cannot be better? And in today's work environment, it is pushing those at the top, right? Because many times I was watching the other day, I think I was reading a book, and the author was defining what we mean in general terms when we say about organizations. What do we mean, right? Organizations need to be more transparent. Organizations need to be more diverse. What he says, organization actually means the top executives, because the bottom individual is likely not the one that can create that change. So it's the idea that when you use the term organizations, you're truly referring to the executives of the organization, who are the decision makers, who are the ones that can influence. And while I believe that change can happen from the bottom, it's much harder, particularly when the top is pushing it down, right? So you're trying to drive change, but the top is saying, nope, just do as I say. I don't have to be in these meetings about culture. You're the one that needs to be there. I don't need it. And I experienced that pretty much throughout my career when I've worked at the corporate level, to the point that in one organization, they're talking about the culture. They're talking about the pillars of the organization, the values of the organization. And I had just started that same week, and they're talking about it. And then I go, okay, so just a question. So when are we going to go through these training here at the corporate level? And I'm not kidding. The CEO says, oh no, that's not for us. That's for the field. I said, okay. It's that disconnect that you may find between corporate and field, but you may also find it between employees and senior leadership, where they say, well, these things are for you guys. It's not for us. Today's work environment is demanding a lot more. What do you think?
Wow. Working for a small organization, I don't feel like we run into that issue very much. And I'm very thankful that we don't. And I imagine that it's like that in larger corporations. But I'll speak to one of our fundamentals is always ask why. And we push that one a lot because no matter where you're at in whatever hierarchy, we don't even have a hierarchy. It's called an accountability chart. You own your own role and seat. If you have a way to make that role be more efficient, or you have a strategy that could help your department, or you're questioning why we're doing something a certain way, speak up. We want to hear it. We want to hear your ideas. So regardless of where you're at and what role you hold, it's everybody's ideas and are valued. So fortunately, I don't have that issue, but I imagine it is a huge issue.
Of course. Yeah. All right. And then the final step is step number 8, drive your culture through accountability. What does that mean?
Yeah, and so similar to what you were just referring to is holding everyone accountable to the behaviors, and kind of referencing that culture cop term again, is like being comfortable, everyone being comfortable calling people out when they're not living up to the behaviors that we set for the organization. So just holding everyone accountable, and self-accountability as well, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that you are acting and leading in that way too.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to get a little bit of insight to close on O'Neill. Again, for those that are listening and watching that may be thinking, yeah, but they're a small company, so it's easy to do.
Sure.
Yeah, that may be part of the premise, but I think at the end of the day, the core components of the framework are absolutely applicable regardless of size, but it comes down to the behaviors and the accountability that people have for self and for others. Tell me a little bit about, do you guys do any type of training around emotional intelligence, defining leadership, or you don't do any of that and just engage in conversations?
So I would say it's not really a formal or a structured training, but it's constant conversation and opportunities where we take the team away for the day and we do offsite things and activities and team building and things like that. But we do the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, by Gino Wickman. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So that process has taught us to put the culture at the center of the business strategy. And so we have, and the department is trained on, there's a framework around that too. So it's almost like we have two operating systems, but the culture is at the center of the second operating system, which is
What's the first one called?
Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS. And the book is called Traction by Gino Wickman. And that book is basically the blueprint for how to run your organization off of EOS.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I'm going to look. So you have two frameworks, but I guess if I'm correct, then the 8-step framework just falls inside EOS.
Yes. That's how we use it. We put the culture at the center, but EOS is more like, okay, what's your 3-year goal? What's your 2-year goal? What's your 1-year goal? What are the quarterly goals? So the team's trained around all of that. We have department heads that have training on how to run the meetings with their departments and things of that sort. So
Okay.
yeah, but it still is keeping culture at the core of it all.
If you can share with me, what have been some of the challenges that O'Neill has faced in implementing the 8-step framework?
Sure. I'd say one main challenge that has just become an opportunity is, we're a multi-generational workplace, and we have people that have just been there for years, and even prior to the acquisition worked for the other company. So they've been amazing at just kind of adjusting and getting used to this idea of culture. But I think a challenge early on was like to get people to know this isn't the next new shiny object that's going to go away in a couple months. This is something that we're really, really going to stay focused and true on. And it took probably a year and a half where people started being like, wow, like this organization is very serious about culture. And so, and I don't think they had a bad culture. They did not have a bad culture beforehand. They had a good culture. But you could have good cultures, I think Friedman says, by chance. You have world-class cultures by design.
Yeah.
And I love that. And so really staying true to the rituals, even when people were like, all right, like, is this going to keep going? Now it's a practice. Now everybody's kind of rowing in that same direction towards the core purpose. But
yeah, and so here's where I would not challenge, but I would say, so I'm reading this book called The 9 Lies of Work. I don't know if you've read it.
No.
And the first lie is that they try to debunk, right? This is the authors, one of them works at Cisco, the other one has been a researcher, and they try to debunk these lies through their own research and experiences. So they're backing it up, right? They're not just coming up with lies and say, that's a lie because I feel like it. No, here's the research. And the first lie is that people join companies, right? And the premise is that based on the research, people may join a company, but what keeps them is the team. And the whole concept that the most important person would be the team leader, and hiring that team leader and giving data to that team leader, because while the organization may not be great, if my team is great, then I'm more likely to stay. So here you have an O'Neill. How many employees did you say you guys have?
23.
All right, so you have 23, so it's a small team, But I'm sure that within the 23, there's probably smaller teams that are created. Just it happens.
Right.
But now you are in a larger organization, 1,000 employees, 8,000 employees, and you have multiple teams. And what these authors say is that you're going to have cultures within each. So if we think of units and think of stores, each store is going to have its own culture, and that's okay. But I guess what David Friedman may argue is, yeah, but you still need to design it. And this is where the framework then comes into play. How do you think teams have worked within O'Neill in not only aligning with the culture as a whole, but also creating their own culture, and that culture doesn't depart too much from what the overall culture is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of look at it as a curriculum almost. So if you look at a school district and they plan out the curriculum and you're teaching the teachers how to teach the curriculum to the students, I think it's very similar. You know, our department heads who lead those teams it goes to step number 8, drive accountability, are accountable to the behaviors. That doesn't mean that you can't be a little different, right? It's just, these are the behaviors that help our organization drive success. So as long as the behaviors are on track, then they're not going to waver too far, you know?
Yeah.
And actually, if we have one of those issues where we start feeling like a department is kind of leaning a little bit too far outside of the rails, then that's a coaching opportunity.
Got it.
Coaching opportunity.
Yep. And which is basically step 6.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah.
So listen, I love the framework. Again, even though I didn't know about it, it has given me it's basically a plan, and I'm looking forward to receiving the book, because I may propose it as a way of approaching not only the creation of an employee value proposition, which is another webinar that I participated, and I'm trying to connect this employee value proposition with the concept of culture and the 8-step, and creating a framework for larger organizations that want to do this. But I always like to close by giving the guests the opportunity to say and share anything they want. You can pitch anything, a webinar that you're doing, anything about O'Neill. You have a minute. The floor is yours. Take it away.
Oh, I love that. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's been such an honor to be on. This is a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about. Culture, it's transformed my life. I'm a mother, and it's given me such a fulfillment in my work life, and allows me to bring that work life home and feel fulfilled, feel like I'm doing meaningful work. And so when I come home, I'm in such a good mood as well. I'm just very passionate about my job. I'm passionate about my role as a mom and a wife. And I feel like I'm in a great place, and it speaks volumes to the culture at O'Neill Insurance. They've really created that. And I know I'm not the only one there that feels that way. So it's an honor to work for an organization with a great culture that's incredibly intentional about their culture. And so I recommend any business to, regardless of the size, like to really invest and focus in on that culture. This is something that we now teach and can consult on through David Friedman's program. So if it is something that anyone's interested in, Patrick O'Neill is the consultant on it. He's certified to teach it. For any organization, it could be large. Large is more customized. If it's a small organization, it's a little bit easier of a rollout. But so if that's something of interest for anyone, we'd love to have a conversation.
Awesome. So I didn't know that. So you can actually become certified on the framework, and then you can go, and help organizations, which in this case, O'Neill Insurance is doing.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's cool. I'm going to look into that.
Good.
Well, listen, I appreciate very much your coming. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'm going to edit the issues, but I appreciate very much that you gave me the chance to not only get to know you, get to know a little bit O'Neill, but more importantly, educate me on this 8-step framework. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here, and let me know how you like the book. I'd love to hear your feedback on it.
I will let you know. Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. Thank you very much, Dani.
Thanks.
Take care.
Have a great day. You too.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.